There are 5 teams next year entering the 2024 college football season who are on playoff or bust watch. Now, these 5 teams are all heavy favorites to make a college football playoff appearance. But I think that that's the floor of what their expectations and what their goals are. I think if these 5 teams, if one of them did not make the college football playoff, that is a failed season based on their roster, who's on their roster, the scheduling dynamics that these teams have, the talent that they're bringing back, the portal additions, what they're doing in the offseason to plan for this year. Like, you can point to Ole Miss for that, but not making the playoff for these teams, especially teams like Ohio State. Who have missed last year and have the expectations of making it every year and have missed it. Like, there will be some serious questions that will need to be answered. And I think the floor for the expectations for all of these teams is a playoff bid. So let's quickly start with the top here at Ohio State. They have 3 big notable games. They have at Oregon, at Penn State, and then Michigan. Like, those are 3 really, really hard games. So don't want to overlook that. But that's kind of it. Their out of conference is Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. Very manageable. And then in conference, outside of the 3 big games that they're playing, Northwestern, Indiana, Purdue, Michigan State, Iowa, and Nebraska. Guys, this is an easy schedule. They have, it's a 3 game schedule essentially. The trip to Autzen and the trip to Beaver Stadium, and obviously the game. Those are going to be really, really marquee games. Honestly, if they go 0-3, well, maybe not based on the rest of their schedule, but those are their only games. Those 3 games. Next, let's look at Ole Miss. They have a similar kind of scheduling dynamic. Sure, they have 3 really big games. They have at LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia. And that's it. Like Georgia, that's going to be a really, really tough one. At LSU will be a tough one. Oklahoma, we'll see how they fare in the SEC. But those are the 3 big ones. They're out of conference: Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake, and Georgia Southern. Again, very manageable. Should come out of that 4-0. And now in conference, they're playing Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. Ole Miss is, and this is what's happening with what Lane Kiffin is doing this year, getting ready for 2024. He's adding in a ton of talent through the transfer portal. They have, I think, the highest ranked transfer portal. If not, they're in the top 3. And they're preparing for a year where they have a very manageable SEC schedule. They have pretty much everyone coming back besides Quinshon Judkins, who left, but quarterbacks coming back. They're adding a lot of pieces on the defensive side of the ball, some really big prospects. So they are primed to make the playoff this year. Georgia. Let's move to the next one. Georgia. Now their schedule. This is going to be new territory for Georgia fans. They have a 5-game schedule where they have really, really tough games. Where previously, before, they were working on just like, okay, we need to beat Tennessee and that's it. Florida maybe occasionally, but like, it really, their season was the SEC championship game. That's what it came down to this year. They lost Alabama in the SEC championship game. So their schedule this year, they have a tough schedule. They have Clemson to start off the year on a neutral site. We'll see how Clemson is, but still, based on their roster talent, that should be a competitive game. And they go at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, Tennessee. Now, this is a tough schedule, guys. They have the best roster in the country, so you can't look past that. But that is a hard schedule, especially for Georgia, who has not had that kind of gauntlet in the previous years. And then the rest of the SEC is Kentucky, Auburn, who knows what they could be, and then Mississippi State and Florida. So, they have a tough schedule, and we'll see what the Bulldogs how they'll manage that. All right, next let's hit Oregon. Oregon, they might be, of all the teams listed here, they might have the best chance to solidify a spot in the college football playoff. And on top of that, I mean, like, if they miss it, that is a colossal failure. They have 2 tough games. They have Ohio State, which they get at home, and then Michigan, who is, Michigan has lost a lot. Their whole half their coaching staff is gone. They've lost a ton of talent. Just won the national championship, so who knows what they'll be like. But their out of conference is Hawaii, Idaho, Boise State, so good G5 opponent, and then Oregon State, the Civil War. Those games are usually pretty solid. But then the rest of the Big Ten, they play UCLA, Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Washington. Like, guys, this is if you're not making the playoff, you're not in a good spot. You had either some terrible luck with injuries and like quarterback injuries, or there's really no other excuse, basically. Okay, then let's go to the last one, Texas. So Texas will be joining the SEC this year. Their schedule is gets a little difficult. They start week 2 at Michigan, so they go to the Big House. That's going to be a really awesome game to look forward to. Then they got Georgia and obviously Oklahoma, who they're going to keep on their schedule as they move into the SEC. Now, the rest of the SEC is Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Kentucky, Florida, and A&M. So a lot of those schools are at the bottom of the SEC. So they have a fairly favorable schedule. Obviously they're going to play Georgia and Michigan and Oklahoma. Those 3 games will be tough, but the rest of it is pretty favorable. A relatively light SEC schedule, and then they have Colorado State, UTSA, and University of Louisiana Monroe out of conference. So again, Sark, tall task joining the SEC, but I think with the 12-team playoff, they should be, fully in the mix to be competing for in a 12-team playoff and making that bid. They return a lot. They brought a lot back in the portal, and I think they're going to be positioned nicely in the SEC, especially in this year, especially where we don't know what Bama's going to be like, and Georgia's really the only looming monster in there that we can really count on. LSU, they're going to be overhauling their defense again, so we'll see how that pans out. So I think Texas is going to be a pretty solid favorite to compete for the SEC championship and as well as getting into the 12-team playoff. I think for them, if they don't get there, that is a really big failure.